following program contains scenes that some viewers may find disturbing.
That Christmas, Keysi came over just sparkling. Her hair, her dress, and everything that weekend just really set her off.
Keysi stayed over that night, and Sunday morning, she had to get home because she had to work at the school on Monday, and she waved to me, and that was the last time I got to see her.
You're totally helpless. You're at a complete loss. You knew everybody was doing everything they could. The frustration was, it still wasn't enough.
She was my baby. I loved her. I tried to call Keysi a couple of times on Monday. On Tuesday, she had an early eye appointment over here in Twin Falls. I called her on the phone again, and there still was no answer, just the answering machine. I called the eye doctor.
She had an appointment today.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Ray. She didn't show
They
up.
said Keysi hadn't showed up.
Thank you. Bye.
It definitely was not Keysi to miss an appointment. She set her schedules and she stayed on them. So there was definitely reason to be concerned.
No one has heard from 30-year-old Keysi Ray since Christmas. 3 days have gone by and her parents are frantic. They have no idea where their daughter is.
I called the boyfriend, and he said, well, I haven't heard from her either. And he said, I'll leave right now for Burley. And I said, well, I'm right behind you.
Judy jumps in her car and drives 60 miles to her daughter's house in Burley, Idaho. She gets there about the same time as Keysi's boyfriend, John Miltenberger. There's no sign of Keysi anywhere. Strangely, her dog Shadow is outside begging to come in. It looks like he hasn't eaten in days. Keysi and Shadow are inseparable. Something's not right.
Judith called me and wanted to know if I knew where Keysi was, because she hadn't heard from her for a couple days, and the dog was in the backyard.
Where's Keysi?
He didn't even have a food dish. The food dish was still packed from her trip.
Leo had hoped that maybe she had gone to a friend's house. And I said, I don't believe she would have done that without calling and telling me. Because she always was that way with me. She wanted me to know where she was.
She always lets us know what's going on.
Judy senses trouble and calls in the Cassia County Sheriff's Office for help.
There didn't seem to be any sign of struggle, really. The house was perfectly clean. There wasn't any chairs knocked over. There wasn't any broken glass. The groceries were just left out. They weren't put away, which would be not normal. And her car was still in the driveway. She just disappeared, and there was no rhyme or reason for it. At least I felt we had a missing person that really was in trouble.
Sheriff Higgins pulls out all the stops in the search for Keysi Ray.
had our search and rescue out looking. We certainly put out all points bulletin for her. We searched about 2 square miles that bordered her home, trying to find something. And we came up with nothing. And so we were concerned.
It's New Year's. As the world joyfully ushers in the new millennium, there's no celebrating at the Ray house. Their youngest child, Keysi, is still missing.
That night, I woke up and she was at the end of our bed. And I said, Keysi. And I was getting out of the bed to grab her. And Leo woke up and said, Judy, she's not there. Judy, there's nobody there.
You're in a situation in which you're totally helpless in where to go and what to do. There's no place to start.
As a father, I understand where Leo and Judy are coming from. I just felt sorry for them because they were just concerned about their daughter.
This is Keysi's first year teaching at Rupert's Memorial Grade School.
Are you guys excited? Yeah?
Instead of staying on the family farm, she chose to follow her dream of working with kids.
Okay.
She was a Libra, and they are very loving, caring, quiet people. And she really did a lot of loving, caring about people.
This is a story about a very, very special dragon.
She was so eager to be starting her career, and we were just happy to have her there. She wanted to be the best that she could be. And of course, being a first-year teacher, that's always very, very difficult.
Good job! Good job!
The kids loved her. She just seemed to have a certain glow about her. She just really had a knack for being around children.
Very good. And what else do you guys know about dragons, yes?
She wanted to be a teacher. She wanted to have an impact on students. She made us proud.
You guys did a good job. Maybe later on we'll get them to do it.
Everybody wanted to know where is she and what's going on, and so it became a very big story very fast. Your first impulse was you thought, well, she's gone somewhere with somebody, she'll be okay, you know, but there was real concern right away because of just the way she left things that wasn't like her.
And then it happens. 5 days after she disappears, Keysi Ray's parents' worst fears are realized.
It was New Year's Day, and a call came in from the sheriff's office saying they'd found a body out southwest of Burley, and they thought it might have been Keysi K, and so I went out there.
Police confirm the body is Keysi K. Ray. She's found 10 miles from her home.
I was sick to my stomach, literally. I said, oh, it can't be. It just can't be, but it was. In my career in law enforcement, I never had an actual missing person that turned out to be homicide.
I can remember the evening of New Year's Day. A car drove up with the lights on. The cops came in and they said, we found her body.
The roadway. Rancher found her riding his horse.
I found her. She's been murdered.
And I said, that was my baby girl. Someone's hurt my baby girl.
I'm so sorry, ma'am.
I was trying not to cry, and the cops said,
You can cry if you want to.
You can cry. You can cry.
Sheriff Higgins calls in Idaho State investigator Stu Robinson to help catch Casey's killer. When Robinson gets to the crime scene, he sees a problem.
When you first arrive or you find these type of crime scenes, is your mental notes is to make sure and find every single piece of evidence that you can there. And especially outside, we were dealing with the environment. You're going to lose evidence. In fact, we did. We had a snowstorm come in. We had to cover the area with a tarp.
As the first winter storm of the year sweeps through the Magic Valley, Robinson and his team work quickly to gather clues before their crime scene is buried in snow.
When you're at a crime scene and you're looking at the body in itself gives you a good idea of what has happened. She was fully clothed, and in fact, she was wearing a coat, and she was also wearing a heavy scarf around her neck, which contained a lot of the blood around her neck area and her face. You could tell that she had been dragged to the position that she was in because her feet were close proximity together, and her hands were outstretched back behind her head.
Robinson's team makes two intriguing finds: a frozen pool of blood several yards from Casey's body, and suspicious tracks at the edge of the nearby road.
The tire tracks were a definite indication that she had arrived there in a vehicle and somebody had dropped her off there. There's no question about which way they came and which way they left.
Something else about the tire tracks catches Robinson's experienced eye.
We had two different tire tracks, and one of the tires appeared to be fairly worn. It also indicated that the vehicle was not properly maintained, which would be somebody from a lower income. So this tells you a little bit now about the person that you're looking for.
Police have a starting point, but no idea of the bizarre twists ahead as they work to solve the mystery of Casey Ray's murder. Burley, Idaho, the breadbasket of the American Northwest. It's the day after a worldwide party rings in the new millennium. Celebrations here come to an end with some awful news. A popular young school teacher has been murdered.
It was a tragedy, you know, that everybody felt it. And the children were going to be so affected by it.
You know, some of those kids just cried and cried over that for days and days. And although they didn't go into specific details of what had occurred, the kids just knew that their teacher was not going to be back.
This murder of Casey Ray became very big news because this type of crime does not happen in this type of community. The fact that it was a whodunit, the fact that she was dumped out in the field, it puts a big scare into a lot of the community. Everybody starts watching out for everybody else.
We were on edge all the time because we really didn't know why this had happened. We didn't know if she had been randomly chosen as a victim or if she had been targeted for this. So we were a little scared at that point.
Who killed Casey Ray and why? 5 days after she's found in a frozen field, the Cassia County Coroner's Office makes a horrifying discovery.
It wasn't until after the autopsy that we found the severe injury to her skull. It was evident that this person wanted to make sure that she was dead.
I need a photograph of this. I need the exact dimensions.
The coroner also finds that Casey was raped during a violent sexual struggle. Bruises on her wrists suggest she may have been tied down.
There were rumors that kind of went around that he may have tied her to her bed. Some very bizarre things that happened, you know, prior to her actually being killed. And I can remember people talking about how terrible it must have been for her.
The investigation takes police in a freakish and frighteningly unexpected direction.
We found that about the time that Kaycee Ray had showed up missing, that there had been several calls of an individual dressed like a woman that had been trying to get into different females' homes. I don't believe the public even knew that this was going on.
Could there be a bizarre sexual predator lurking in the heartland? There's not much evidence to collect at the crime scene. There's no murder weapon, no fingerprints. All they've got are the tire tracks by the side of the road. The results of the autopsy aren't much better. They reveal the sheer brutality of her rape and murder. But there are doubts there's enough semen to be tested. One clue captures the full attention of state investigator Stu Robinson. A bloodstain he noticed on the back of Casey's pants.
There was blood on the back knee of her pant, and I believe that it was a high probability that it was the suspect's blood.
Although the initial tests indicate the blood belongs to Kaycee, Robinson won't let go. He has a hunch something's been missed. He wants the lab to test it again, and this time try something that was still pretty new in 2000. DNA analysis.
The reason I was so persistent on having the blood on the back of her pant leg tested, anytime you're investigating and stabbing, cutting during a violent attack, you will find that probably 90 to 95% of the time the suspect will cut himself and there will be blood from him. I wanted everything done that I could on this case. And having DNA was something very spectacular. It was almost like finding a fingerprint on a gun. You now knew that if you ever found the suspect, you would be able to identify him through his DNA.
The DNA testing on the bloodstain will take months to get results. While they wait for modern science, investigators look for suspects the old-fashioned way. Kaycee's family and friends have absolutely no idea who would want to hurt her.
There was no one that we knew who had any reason to do harm. I had no name I could put on. No one I knew would be a suspect.
Her family is certain that none of Kaycee's friends could possibly be involved. But State Investigator Robinson isn't so sure.
Most homicides are committed by people or individuals that they know. The area that she was left at definitely makes you believe that somebody had to know that area. This was not just some random area off a road. This person had purposely driven to this area, had to have some knowledge of it in order to take and transport a body out there and leave it.
You're saying you used the keys to get in here?
Going back to Kaycee Ray's house, where there was not any forced entry, that led us to believe that this was somebody close to her, at least somebody that she knew.
Could that someone be her boyfriend, John? Is there a dark side to him friends and family don't know about?
John Mittenberg was Kaycee K. Ray's boyfriend and the last person to see her alive. And so they were a little more concerned about him because I don't think he had any crystal clear alibis or anything that could get him off. And so if they couldn't assure it wasn't him, they weren't going to just set him aside until they knew.
As Robinson digs deeper, he discovers their 3-year relationship isn't going so well. On the Christmas Eve before her death, Kaycee confides to her mom she's thinking about breaking up with John.
I'm sorry I'm late, everybody. Hi.
She was a little bit upset with John, her boyfriend.
I'm sorry I'm late.
I think he came in a little late. Well, he was a year or two younger than she was. And she wanted to find a man to marry because she wanted children. I think she was expecting a little bit more.
Keysi actually was focused on her new career. She was going places. I mean, John was living with his mother at the time still. I think she was looking at moving on.
Did John find out she was going to leave him and react violently? As far as Robinson can see, John isn't the type to hurt a woman.
I don't know what happened the last time I saw her. Yes!
John was not what I would call a good suspect, but he was somebody we looked at, somebody that we needed to look further into.
A Friday night role-playing game seems to be the extent of Miltenberger's dark side. To be absolutely sure, Robinson takes a DNA sample. Will it match the blood found on Keysi's pants? With no other suspects and no leads into Keysi's death, her family celebrates her life and pays tribute to her lasting spirit.
The funeral was the Sunday, and it was really a lovely funeral.
Keysi was the baby of the family. She was born the first year we started building the farm. She was a beautiful girl. She wanted to get married, she wanted kids.
She loved kids, so I'm sure she would have been a great mother. And she would have been an amazing teacher.
I hugged her in the funeral home. I didn't care whether she was alive or dead. I still went in there and hugged her.
Two weeks into the investigation, police have no suspects. Then, out of the blue, they get a call. Someone says Keysi may have already started to see another man, and her family knows nothing about it. Two weeks after the murder of first-grade teacher Keysi Ray, a new name pops up. Someone police think they should take a serious look at.
George Jones came to us as a suspect through his sister-in-law, and she had heard about this case, and she had informed us that George had told her she was dating a school teacher, and she thought the name was Keysi Ray. She had also said he was very weird, very strange acting, and especially at the time frame that Keysi came up missing.
Her mom knew Keysi was thinking about leaving her current boyfriend.
Can we do this?
Had she already moved on to someone new?
We actually ended up finding another witness that says she saw a female in George's van, and that this female had a dog. Keysi never went anywhere without the dog. We did a photo lineup and showed it to this witness, and she identified Keysi as being the gal in the van.
That's definitely her. That's definitely the girl I saw in the van.
That told me, too, that she was in the process of trying to find someone else besides John. They told me she had met him at the pizza parlor, and they had gotten together a few times. She had only known him for, maybe 4 weeks. She hadn't even told me about him.
What other secrets did Keysi keep from her mother? Higgins and Robinson do some digging and uncover some troubling details about the new man.
We started looking at Mr. George Jones, who did have a criminal background, and through his ex-wife, we found out that he could very well be the type to commit this type of crime.
Jones has a reputation for violence. Could he be the man who dresses in drag to attack women?
We find where George Jones lives, and we go to his house.
We've got a room here that
But we found that he had moved out of his place in the middle of the night. He left on the day that the newspaper came out that Keysi Ray had been found.
looks like Jones left in a hurry.
They had gone into his apartment and vacuumed the carpet. And some of the fuzz from her pink jacket was on his carpet.
You're hot on the trail now. Now you really got something worthwhile going after.
Jones is now their chief suspect. Where is he?
We start doing some checking, and we find out through family members that he is in Iowa.
The tip pays off. They find George Jones at a construction site in Cedar Rapids.
George Jones? From Rupert, right? I'm Detective Robinson.
There, we pull him off of the work site, and we have him come in, and we start doing an interview with him, and he denies even knowing Kaycee Ray.
Okay, I promise you, I remember.
With that, Jones is done talking. But Robinson isn't done investigating.
We've got a search warrant through the Iowa justice system to do the searches and seize everything. And then we processed his whole vehicle. We were not able to find anything that could put Kaycee Ray there in his vehicle, and the tires didn't match either.
His tires don't match the tread pattern found at the crime scene. Maybe Jones is trying to cover his tracks. Just days after the murder, he put new tires on his van.
You leave. Your tires.
Things don't look good for Jones.
During the interview, looking at the body language, watching him, his answers, I was pretty sure, I thought we had our guy.
Can you explain the fact that you...
We finally decided to give him a polygraph. He fails the polygraph.
How can you explain your failed polygraph?
Jones sticks to his story. He doesn't know Kaycee, and he had nothing to do with her murder. There's no evidence he's the cross-dressing stalker.
So we obtained court orders to get his DNA. And then we took samples from George, and I bring everything back to Idaho to have it tested.
The Idaho State Crime Lab comes back with surprising results. Robinson's hunch about a bloodstain on Kaycee's pants proves right, but not as he expected. The blood is Kaycee Ray's, not the killer's. To his surprise, they find semen mixed in with the blood. Robinson has DNA from the man who raped and likely murdered Kaycee Ray. But it's not a match for George Jones. The DNA also clears Kaycee's boyfriend, John Miltenberger. DNA might clear the man, but what about the method? In the months since Kaycee's murder, there have been no reports of other attacks by a man dressed as a woman. The investigation is back to square one.
I think it kind of scared people when George suddenly was no longer a suspect. They thought, oh, wait a minute, we thought we knew and now we don't. This guy's on the loose again. We don't have who we thought we did.
In this particular case, you had absolutely nowhere to go. Other homicides I had, you've always had somebody, you had a suspect. We did not have anything. I mean, it was a tough case.
We were digging, looking for new leads. We were trying everything we could, trying to generate something on this. It plays on you if you cannot solve a case. This is a human being. This is somebody's daughter.
Just not knowing creates a lot of frustration and stress. And they kept us very well informed on everything they had. The comfort was that you knew everybody was doing everything they could. The frustration was it still wasn't enough.
I think people wanted to have faith in the police department, but I think there was a lot of them that felt like enough wasn't being done.
Kaycee never left me. I was in the kitchen one day, and chimes started making noise, and I turned around and looked at him, and her voice said, "Mom, I'm all right. I really am all right, Mom."
Judy had a hard time going to sleep at night, and I would wake up early and couldn't sleep. You lay there frustrated, not knowing what was going on.
With no arrest, the town is on edge. Police wonder, is the killer a complete stranger now long gone from the area?
In law enforcement, it's probably the worst nightmare you can come up with. You have a random homicide, and it's somebody that just picked someone for whatever reason it may have been, and that was tough to solve. Now we knew that somebody actually probably followed her to her house, or was in the house when she entered. We got somebody out there who has killed this young lady, and I'm praying that it isn't a serial killer.
Just as DNA evidence rules out all their leads, it doesn't take long for their worst nightmare to come true. There's another terrifying and bizarre attack. Four months after the rape and murder of schoolteacher Keysi Ray, her killer is still on the loose. "60 miles east of Burley, in neighboring Power County, Edna Whitna is alone at home when her quiet afternoon is interrupted.
This guy comes to my house and he knocks on the door.
Hi, sorry to bother you.
He says, I need to use the phone. And so, you know, you're trying to be helpful. He had this long, sleazy, dirty little wig and just a t-shirt. And I thought, you look really bad. He had nothing on underneath, this long t-shirt. And I thought, oh my God. I knew I was in trouble. There was no way I could get out of the house because he had me blocked. I couldn't go out the back door. I couldn't go out the front door. And then he grabbed me. And then he started to hit me. I don't know how many times, but I know I was well bruised. And then he wanted to go upstairs.
We're gonna go upstairs. We're gonna have a little play. Move it!
When he got me upstairs, he said, take your clothes off. His intentions were rape.
Get in there!
I told him that there was someone coming home. I didn't say who.
You think that hurts? I have a surprise for you.
Pretty soon, he goes downstairs. And you could hear him in the kitchen. He come back with a butcher knife. When the knife came, I felt like, this is it. I am not going to make it. And I just kept talking away about, I don't know what. I would have just gave anything if someone would have came along, but no one did. Then he took some money, and he says, now, if you don't say anything, you'll be fine. I remember him saying, don't let strangers in your house. And so, and I thought, believe me, it won't happen again.
You should never let strangers inside your house.
Edna gets lucky. The assault suddenly stops with a warning. If she tells anyone, he'll come back and kill her. Edna ignores the threat and summons the courage to call the police.
Sergeant Morris had sent out a attempt to locate on the description of the man that we had and the description of the car. And that went out to all the surrounding counties. It wasn't very long after that Bingham County had called here to the sheriff's office and felt they had someone that may be the man that we're looking for.
He's alone, his car broken down by the side of the highway. And everything about this man is off.
There was women's clothes, like I remember a pair of high heel shoes. He had an old wig. It wasn't well kept. There were 2 whips. One was a cat of nine tails whip. There were handcuffs with fur on them. There was a lot of pornography depicting sadomasochistic acts. He didn't accumulate the pornography in a short period of time, and he certainly didn't accumulate all of the whips and the handcuffs and those kind of things at the same time.
The cross-dressing man with a strange collection of sex toys is Troy Alonzo. He's brought in and questioned about the attack on Edna Whitna.
Be honest with me. Where were you earlier tonight?
Alonzo told me what I wanted to hear, at least most of what I wanted to hear. We started in on what had happened, and he admitted it. However, I felt there was something else.
I don't think this is the first time you've done this.
Alonzo is convicted for the assault on Edna Whitna and is registered as a violent sex offender.
Under Idaho law, because it was a sex offense, DNA samples were taken from him and were placed into the statewide database, CODIS, or actually national database.
Two years go by. State investigator Stu Robinson is still hunting for whoever raped and killed young Kaycee Ray. He has no suspects and no leads, but he does have the DNA found on her pants. In a last-ditch effort, he submits it to the CODIS database, hoping for a match. On the 4th of July, he gets stunning news.
The head of the crime lab called me and told me that they had a CODIS hit on her DNA. The suspect was in custody in prison in Boise, Idaho. This was Idaho's very first hit.
I was absolutely ecstatic. On the 4th of July, some technician in Boise is testing DNA. It's just amazing.
If the DNA evidence is right, Kaycee Ray was raped and killed by someone who was never on the radar, never a suspect.
We had no idea who Troy Alonzo was until we got that DNA hit.
The man is in custody right now.
Investigators learn Troy Alonzo has a very dark and troubled past.
What did you do when you were in the house?
He's had very problems with law enforcement. He was actually involved in prostituting himself out to other men during this time also.
She wouldn't stay still.
I'm not sure Troy knew whether he was heterosexual or homosexual. My sense was always that this was some kind of odd fantasy world that he lived in, where he dressed as a woman, stalked women. Troy had inflicted a lot of fear and pain on women in his lifetime.
I was very surprised to find out who this person was, especially when, in talking with the family, they had no idea who this was. So how did he get close to Kaycee was going to be interesting to find out. We found that in the early 90s, he had been charged for an assaulting a female. Well, the interesting fact about this was that he had followed her from the same store that Kaycee Ray had been out to the last day that she was known to be alive.
It turns out most of the women Alonzo attacks are too scared to tell police until Edna Whitna comes forward with her harrowing story.
I think he was gonna kill me.
Robinson needs more than a DNA match to make his case. He travels to Idaho State Prison to see if he can get Alonzo to open up.
We sit down and we meet with Troy Alonzo, and he's kind of an interesting character. You'd have to understand that a person like Troy Alonzo, that they have this aura about him. He is a very evil person, and it definitely comes out around him. When we asked about Kaycee Ray, he stated he did not know her, had no knowledge of her, no connection with her at all. We let him know that we actually did have the DNA, the CODIS hit.
This puts you right there.
And then at that time, he decided he didn't want to speak with us any longer.
Robinson, I want to talk to my lawyer.
2.5 years after the murder of Kaycee Ray, Troy Alonzo is in jail for the attack on Edna Whitna. He's retained a lawyer, but having come this far, Robinson isn't about to let him off the hook. Years after the murder of 30-year-old Kaycee Ray, DNA evidence links convicted sex offender Troy Alonzo to the crime. Police need a confession to clinch it. The only interview Alonzo agrees to is with his lawyer.
Many criminal defense lawyers don't like to ask their clients what happened. They don't want to know. But I want to know everything. Troy, early on, he was denying having ever met Kaycee. He just absolutely denied that he had ever seen her. 2 or 3 months prior to trial, I had received from the prosecuting attorney's office photographs of the interior of Kaycee's apartment. I showed those photographs to him, and you see the light come on. He said, I've been there. I've been in that apartment. I've been there. And then it just simply progressed on from there.
Yeah, I've been here before.
I've never before had a situation like I did with him where simply showing him photos of a crime scene caused a complete 180-degree turn.
I followed her home.
Once he confessed, he was insistent that he wanted to plead guilty, and so my role changed immediately.
For a brief, lucid moment, a deranged man opens a window onto what happened on the evening of December 26th, 1999.
Troy told me that he was out of money and essentially homeless.
He would sit in the parking lot at different major grocery stores, and he would wait till a certain female came out, one that had a certain height, weight, hair color that he was attracted to. He saw Kaycee Ray, and so he followed her home.
Mr. Alonzo was looking for a set of circumstances or a weakness in an individual where someone was vulnerable.
Once he felt confident that they were alone, he would dress up like a woman. He had a wig that he put on. He had a skirt that he'd put on. He had nylons, a woman's blouse. He'd put on lipstick, and then he'd go to the door and say his car broke down and wanted to use their phone.
We know that he would leave if there was more than one person there.
As he had done in other similar situations, knocked on her door and asked to use her phone.
Once he got into the house, he pinned her onto the couch. The dog became very aggressive toward him, and Kaycee said that she would do anything for him as long as he didn't hurt her dog. So he allowed her to put the dog outside.
Desperate to save her dog Shadow's life, Kaycee makes a deal with a madman.
I don't want to stay still.
She submits to his dark fantasy. But by the time she realizes the brutal extent of his intentions, it's too late.
Troy told me that after he raped her, that his intent was to run. And he then decided that he wanted a head start because he believed that she would call police and report the rape.
Are you taking me?
As far as her jumping out of the car, I mean, those are country roads. It was the middle of winter. I'm guessing he was probably traveling 55 to 60 miles per hour, which is the speed limit out there. It just was a horrible situation for her.
I just need some time to get away, okay? You can make your way back home.
Alonzo tells Casey he's just driving her out of town so she can't call police right away. Then he changes his mind.
Once he got out in the field, that's where he decided that he was going to kill her because he didn't want her to talk. He'd cut her throat, but then he also wanted to make sure that he'd kill her, so then that's when he used a tire iron and crushed her head.
And then he drug her over to where he left her body, and he drove away.
On September 2nd, 2004, Troy Alonzo is convicted for the murder of Casey Ray. He's sentenced to life in prison, but dies from chronic health problems 2 years later.
We finally got some justice and hopefully got some closure for the Rays. I think of them often, even today. The tragedy they had to go through by losing a very beautiful and very talented young lady, their daughter.
It was nice to know why it had happened, how it had happened, and who did it. It wasn't a pleasant thought, but it was some closure.
I owe it to the victim. That is why I worked these cases, and that's why I worked them until they were solved. You want to be able to bring the person that did this to trial, make them pay for their crime.
If Casey was already dead, we wasn't going to get her back. But we could prevent this guy from doing it to somebody else. And that would have happened. I have no doubt.
She just didn't deserve what she got. She's greatly missed even today. I'm sure some of those kids that are graduating this year do remember her, and it's very tender.
I would see her in certain stores, in the mall. She would just appear. And the last time I saw her was after the trial. She was standing by the neighbor's mailbox, and she waved to me. And that was the last time I got to see her. But she knew it was settled. And she sure could go in peace. She was my baby, and I loved her.